Welcome to the 50 Years of Fantasy podcast. I'm your host, Katie, and I'm joined by Thor Knai. He is a veteran, a gamer, a game designer, and an actor. And we're also joined by DJ, who is a video game special effects artist, dungeon master, and our friend. Thank you for joining me on my show.
Of course. Chris asked very nicely, so I was like, of course. And DJ's going to be, if he said DJ was going to be here, I'd be like, yes, obviously. I don't even care what he's doing. I'm going to be there. Yeah.
I am just a stranger. You see, I have not got to go on the adventures. I just sit at my home and I see all the pictures and the videos after the fact. So this is my way of being involved.
That's fair. That's a great way to get involved, and then from there to actually having to be there to do the thing. And yeah.
Yes. So that's what I'm slowly transitioning into. So now, we've tested the waters. All of you guys have been on camera. Now it's my turn. And I've been playing some D&D, so we're getting in there. I played a little bit in college, but now we've played a lot more in our house, and I got to go down to Jackson and play more, and now I really want to go play, because see what it's like. I don't know. It's different.
Yeah, it becomes a little bit of an addiction if you have a personality that would enjoy D&D, which is a lot of people. And then you're in. Then that's just what you do.
Yeah, they've got the constant struggle of not having a hard time saying no to new games. It always comes up someone's like, should we do another one? What about this genre or edition or whatever? It's hard to say no. So I find myself often in too many games.
Because you're the forever DM that everybody loves, I'm guessing. So they will ask you to run every game they want to have, I'm sure.
Yeah. And Thor, just to tell you how Chris and I prepped for this show, is we watched your episodes of Crazy Ex-Girlfriend. I bought them on Apple so that we could watch them.
Thank you. I thank you for your 2 cents. I appreciate it. That's funny that you did that. Those are so much fun to do. I love that. They were so good. I'm not a musical theater kid, but they are, and they're incredibly good at it.
Yes.
It was cool.
If you have not seen the show, you really should. You're a fan of musicals. It's an amazing show. And we were big fans before, and so then when Chris met you, he was like, you won't believe it. I've met this person from a show you enjoy. And I was like, oh man. You have relevance, not just D&D. You're a whole full human being.
I love hearing that. I love hearing that there's other things out there than just, I met this guy at a weird castle in England. He's cool. It's a slightly less weight and also a show you like. Yeah. Sweet. Well, thank you for watching it and supporting the Thorian cause.
Of course. And of course, you guys all met at D&D in a castle, right?
Yeah, DJ ran a game for me, which is unlike any game I've played before. I didn't even know what I was signing up for, to be honest. He's walking around in this hilarious costume. What was the wrestler? I'm not a wrestling guy. Who was it?
Macho Man Randy Straude.
Macho Man Randy Straude, meaning he's now the evil vampire lord version of Macho Man Randy, and it was absolute bonkers, and it was really cool. You did it well. That was fun with the customized minis, the ring. Oh my god, he had the ring and a special version of it with extra effects. I'm not gonna spoil it, but it was that was cool. Yeah, thanks for running that, man. That was well done.
Yeah, super awesome to have you as a player too. It's nice to have other pro DMs as players in your games. Katie and I were just talking about that a bit ago. That was a fun one. That came about when my wife usually decides what Halloween costume I'm going to have, and she just got me Randy Macho Man. I've just seen a video online about the origin of Ravenloft and how Tracy Hickman, that used to be his Halloween one shot that he would do at his house.
Right.
And so, those two things in the same day just kind of merged ideas and thus spawned that game.
Thus creativity flowing.
Ridiculousness ensues.
Yeah. Well, I got to say, it was just kind of a random occurrence, and you had all those minis just prepped. That's high-level D&D right there.
Yeah.
Love it.
did you end up snapping into a Slim Jim for your character also?
Oh, 100% had to do that. But I mean, it's dog food, I think. But it's also an inspiration or whatever it was. So it's important to suffer for my character. Yeah.
It's fun to build in stupid gimmicks, but then have like actual gameplay mechanics around them.
Yeah, no, exactly. That was also well done. The whole thing was just pro shit, dude. I loved it.
Right out there.
Yeah.
You kind of force your players into something awkward that they kind of have to do if they really want to move forward.
Yeah, and if you're playing with people who've played hundreds and hundreds of games of D&D, then you gotta do just a little something different or special, and then it'll be like, oh, nice.
Mm-hmm.
So yep.
How about
no regrets? Sorry.
Give us your version of that. How do you approach writing adventures and making them unique, interesting, memorable,
God.
more exceptional than just sort of your standard average campaign?
You know what? To be perfectly honest, I don't do that unless I'm at D&D in a castle. I don't really write my own D&D stuff. What I do is use the modules that they have, because that kind of becomes the D&D zeitgeist in a way. Like if you've played these modules, you know about the lore and the player. Everyone enjoys knowing what's going on rather than just my homebrew and then not having any clue about what pop culture D&D contains, right? So I do play the pop culture D&D modules, but of course I'll modify them as I see fit if something isn't as interesting as it could be or whatever. But for me, my main DM trick, I think that I do isn't the crazy world building. It's not the massive awesome minis that I can have made somehow, or the deeply emotional things that some of these D&D and castle people are so good at, man. I think I'm good at riffing off my players. So like I will have the thing set up and I'll know what's going to happen, but then I can read them enough to realize what they would think would be the next fun thing to happen, or you feed them in a way where they contribute to the story in a way that they feel is meaningful, and think that I'm a genius, whereas really it's their ideas, right? So that's my secret, really, and I think I don't even know how to like translate that into like, oh, and this is how you can do that in your game, other than listen to them and be open to new approaches, of course, and encourage them to participate and add to the scene or the story, or if anything that makes sense. If they can add to it to like add flavor, or their character want to do something cool, but I didn't say there was a barrel in the corner in this particular room, but if the player then says, if there is a barrel in the corner, or is there a barrel or something, I'll of course be like, yes, there is. Why? And then now they have a cool idea, right? And then it's like, so that's important. But other than that, it's playing a lot of D&Ds, really.
Yeah.
Just being comfortable enough in the DM space in a way to just trust that can go wherever and you'll be fine as a DM, because it's a little nerve-wracking, especially when you're starting out DMing or playing D&D, to contribute in that way, to be like, I'm going to take charge of my little part of the story, and here's what I would love to have happen. A lot of people either just kind of sit there and expect it to happen to them because they play a lot of video games, or DMs, stick to the script real tight because it's important that it happen this way, or we won't get to the next thing. Nah, you'll get there. Or if you don't, you will introduce another element later that forces them to go there. Like you can always fix this stuff not in post, but like you can. There's always a next thing that happens. So no matter what's going on, you can always like just add to the thing. Yeah, you'll get there. So
yeah, just to riff on that too, I feel like there's often an impulse for the DM to like, you're progressing things forward. There's your expectation of what's going to happen, and then a player just throws a total wrench into it. They're like, no, I'm just going to go over here or whatever. But
yeah,
I think that's the most important thing, is to just sort of like suppress your own hesitance and just let it. Like, okay, well, what happens then? And like, try to like not just let it happen, but like feed on it. Like let it fuel another whole little tangent. Those are some of the most cool moments.
100%. And like the like active word for me when it comes to describing why I love D&D is that it's a collaborative storytelling, right? So it's not just the DM telling the story. It's and obviously it isn't that way anyway, because the players decide what they want to do. But it goes beyond that. It's collaborative storytelling beyond just what what would your character exactly do in this moment within your character sheet. It's the whole world, right? It's a fantasy that we build together. So when people get comfortable collaborating and the DM sort of helps almost just, monitor what's happening, then it becomes this glorious mess of collaborative storytelling, and I love that.
Yeah, if you could just like let go and even let your players like just kind of run off on their own in a way, and you're just there to like bumper them around a little bit.
Yeah, you bumper them around, and they may have ideas that just wouldn't work, and here's why. And you keep it, depending on what kind of game you're playing, but I keep it grounded, right? So people will come up with ideas. They're like, "Oh, this wouldn't happen because X, Y, Z," but here's an alternative or whatever. So you're still in the story, you're still doing the thing, but when people can add, it becomes that magical collaboration as opposed to just like we're playing the script that I've read, and you get to react to A or B, not
right.
X, Y, Z. Yeah. So that's the magic of it, the collaboration. So, yeah.
For sure.
So when a player does something like so totally random outside the box of your story, do you have any tricks to try to get them?
Well, yeah, so I touched on it, like I'll ground it, right? Like, first of all, is this even something that your character would know to do or has the ability to do? Or is this how you want to play them? Is it something that would be realistic in the world? Like, all this stuff is happening immediately, right, in my head. And if I find for some reason that it wouldn't be, I'll try to steer them in a more realistic direction. But if it's just, we're going to go over here because I feel like doing that, and as a DM, I can't see any reason why they wouldn't, then I have, if I needed them to go to A and they decide we're just going to go to B, I'm obviously going to let them and then have to find another way to motivate them to go to A because something important is at A. But somehow they didn't know that or didn't catch that or whatever. So now I'll introduce that element stronger or give them another reason to go there. And now both of those things happen when they finally get to A. Like, so I'll let them do whatever and then try to motivate their characters to want to do the thing I want them to do. But it's got to be their idea. So you just kind of introduce elements that would make them want to, or there's is the quest over there the character wants to solve, or you're lost, whatever clues that lead them in that direction that they then decipher to be there. So it's like we said earlier too, like whatever they do, you can always just go the next step over and then course correct if you have to. So yes, just let them. If it's realistic and possible in this fantasy world that you've created, then sure.
It's amazing. As a person who is a parent of 3 people, your entire clip is also parenting advice. Just so that you know, the exact same thing. It's like it's perfectly, just without you realizing it, you're helping people learn and grow and guiding them.
I'm sure there is a big overlap between being like a good, considerate DM and dealing with wrangling children as your players. Sure, the Venn diagram is pretty. Yeah.
We're speaking. Like, oh my god, you live in my head, but we're just solving different problems.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's another beauty of D&D is like you'll see as you play a lot, you'll see a lot of tangents or like connections to like how people act in the outside world and how they are as people and why people do certain things. It becomes this like philosophical tool almost, and a little bit of psychotherapy or
So do you have any examples or thoughts about like just things going off the rails? I've had games sometimes where like just the most ridiculous. Like
I'm sure you have, because one of those things would be your game. So yeah. I'm sure that happens to you all the time.
Totally.
I don't know if I have one where they went horribly off the rails. My players are generally pretty good at like we'll read each other, right? Like they'll know what my intention are, and then they'll find the motivation to do just that. But one example that I give a lot is I had a party with a paladin who was very, very lawful, kind of, but not in like an awful way. But like he couldn't lie, he couldn't do any of these things. He couldn't be a bad guy, do things he knew were illegal or bad. And there were warlocks and rogues in this party. And sometimes in like less experienced groups, that'll create conflict between the players because one want to do this and the other one wants to do this. And they're as players, they're fighting as their characters rather than stepping back and doing what this guy did was because this was a thing they had to break into some place, the group of them, and like rob a guy blind to try to find some sort of proof. But this had happened right outside the street. A cart had just veered off something. Something else had happened. And like there was some chaos which they needed to make as a distraction for them to then break in. But when the time came, okay, we're going to kick in the door here. He couldn't be part of that, right? So he's not going to say no, we can't kick in the door. He says, well, I bet we're in the city. There's probably some children around who witnessed all this, right? And I'm like, yes, of course there are. And they look there, they look stricken over there, and he's like, okay, well, I see that, and I'm gonna go over and like start talking, calming them down, and being like, look, this isn't normal, and just he occupied his own character with something he had then invented that fit his character perfectly, and while he's distracted doing that, they're busting in the door, right? So like a beautiful way for a player to do that kind of conflict maybe in the party and sort of going off the rails, not off the rails, but like a little bit where he's coming up with a different solution than let's argue about whether or not we should do this. I'll find a way where this works. So that was a one that stuck with me. I was like, oh, you're gonna go comfort the children while they break in. I'm like, that's so good.
That's great. It's a mitigation like technique, I think.
Yeah, and just it adds flavor to the story. It's beautiful. His name was also Bieber. For some reason, this paladin's name was Bieber.
Jay Bieber, perhaps.
Yeah, or some version of this. He had a beautiful singing voice. It was great.
Awesome. I love it. That is rad.
Oh my god. So do you Thor play with minis and stuff on your game? DJ was showing me his like crazy setup, and he has all kinds of cool things. How do you play?
So when I narrate stuff, it's normally not minis, or really we use, if anything, overland maps to sort of tell people where we are, what's going on. But when it comes to fighting, I really, really enjoy the tactical element of fighting and the challenges that come with that, right? Like positioning and everyone having a clear idea of what's going on so that they can then do cool tactical things. So for that to happen, you must have minis, in my opinion. So I do have a lot of minis and maps and stuff for that. I don't have these huge builds or custom ones. I really have whatever I do scavenge from other board games, for instance. Like I had my old copy of Hero Quest, which is maybe even one of the reasons I get into D&D in the first place, because that was so cool and it's kind of D&D-esque. But I took that. I wasn't using that, and I painted those minis when I was 11. They're awful, but I took the board, cut it up with scissors. So now you have, instead of having the set board, you now have all these different rooms and hallways and little tiles, and I could make any sort of dungeony shape with all the different parts of that game board now cut to pieces. So I'll definitely use that because the tactics are important to me. It's not just about the role play and the storytelling. It's the combat being like realistic and cool and challenging from a how to solve this perspective is also very fun for me.
Wow, that's awesome.
Yeah, riffing off that a little bit too, like thinking about like combat and encounter design.
Right.
Like there's some like easy, obvious like jumping off points, right? You've got a party of this level, and then monsters kind of around that level. There's sort of the beginning of encounter, right? Is there? What do you do beyond that when coming up with something to put your players up against?
I kind of try to just what would be real, like when I am building a world, which I have obviously done a couple of times with D&D and Castle and stuff, and you touched on this earlier, and I completely failed to answer what do I do to make my world special. I, being Norwegian, and being my name's Thor, obviously there's a certain expectation that comes with that. So I built a Norse, inspired campaign. So then I go through, as I build a campaign out it's actually based on a script I wrote many years ago. What is realistic here and here and here? Like what are they up against? And then use that. And it doesn't necessarily mean like, I don't necessarily scale so that it'll be harder for them, but mostly I don't scale so it will be easy for them. Like if this is something that is just hard, or is intended for later, or a fortified town or something, they're gonna have the entire militia is gonna eventually arrive, not just the 5 people at the gate. You know, you don't get a separate encounter. It's gonna be this whole production. So I do very little, but I mean, I gotta say, in the moment, in a fight, in like let's say one of these pre-published adventures, and it needs to be adjusted because something happened, or someone is especially good at XYZ, or they got very lucky and now it's very easy. I'll obviously flub the. I never flub rolls. Rolls are always open, because then everything, no matter what I do on the back end, now it feels fair because they see that this is what happened.
Yeah.
But I'm messing with the hit points. I'm messing with maybe some of these monsters suddenly have equipment that they're not listed as having. Maybe there are more monsters than it's listed, that are going to show up later. They get reinforcements somehow, or whatever. But and I'll also, and this is important, I'll try to play the monster to the intelligence level that they would, right? Like, this is a monster that has probably survived a very long time to become whatever big thing it was, and has fought a lot, and maybe not exactly the players, so they wouldn't be able to predict what the players are going to do necessarily until they've done it once or twice. Then it starts predicting, right? But it'll definitely already be a very vicious, savage, like no holds barred. Here's what works for me in the past. So like I'll play the monster the way I feel like mentally they would approach the situation. That way, it's not just dice rolling for damage. It's you dealing with a psyche of some sort. In this particular, like, what's an Utiyug gonna think versus what's goblins gonna think versus what are some mercenaries gonna think? Were they paid enough? So things like that. Like, especially when you're dealing with intelligent encounters, there's always other things you can do. Like, you don't have to fight them necessarily, or even mid-fight morale might be breaking, or someone says something that ends up being triggering in some way for that being, and now it's like, well, you know what, screw this, I am in fact not getting paid enough, or, oh, are you going to pay me more, like versions of this, or I don't care enough about this cause to actually lay down my life. I'm not just going to run into this party of players and get killed like the other 3 people did right before me, right? You're going to do something else now. Try to surrender, maybe. So just playing each creature as its own thing, I find helps me a lot, and sets the tone, really, because you're like, oh, I know what this is. It's a rust monster, or it's a whatever. As someone who's played D&D a lot, you might predict exactly how they act, or what kind of stuff they have available to them, at least. But then the monster's mind comes into play, and it's like, oh, okay. And now it becomes interesting in a different way, maybe.
Yeah, another trick that I like to use too is like just subvert expectations a little bit. Like put a twist on a monster. Yeah, you're fighting a rust monster, and you see flames start to like emit from its gills, and it breathes fire on you. Like, rust monsters can't do that, but this one does.
Yeah. And one thing I love to do, especially when I'm writing my own campaigns, so I got to do this for D&D and Castle, or whenever I write my own campaigns, I create the monsters. Like, I might use a template, but then I'll change it, so the players will never know. They'll never be like, it's just this. It's just an orc. I know what's going to happen. No, it's not. It's something, it's a kind of an orc-looking thing, but it has wings, or, the skin's a different color, and it's got, like, glowing runes everywhere. Like, stuff just so they don't know what's happening necessarily is fun.
That's good, in particular, I think, for experienced players, too, who just, by now they know the stat blocks of goddamn everything. And
yeah, exactly. The resistances, whatever. And of course, you're not supposed to be metaing, but you can always find ways to. You can be like, all right, well, I'm going to shoot it with fire because my character thinks it's fire, but we're going to find out round 1 that in fact it's resistant, right? Like, you'll do, instead of waiting till the pivotal moment of like, okay, he either dies here or my friend dies. Now I'm going to use the thing. No one does that, even though that would be cool. That it's resistant to. So people, they will always figure it out unless you do that. You put a twist on it, like you said.
So is that the perk kind of like experienced versus inexperienced players? So like, do you think the changing of the monster helps with more experienced players, or like just to keep the game more interesting for them? And then new players aren't going to know, but it's still going to be interesting. You're kind of playing for 2 audiences.
Yeah, so new players don't know anyway, and have that like awe thing of like, oh my god, what's happening anyway, and it's very hard to create that for really experienced players. So when you put a twist on it like this, new players will be like, oh my god, this is awesome, but they would do that even if it was just a monster.
Yeah.
But now everyone does, right? Because like, oh my god, that's awesome. I wouldn't have expected, or wasn't, So definitely a good DM tip to put some twists on monsters.
Which DJ did for you at the castle.
Mm-hmm. I don't even know what we were dealing with, dude. It was great. Couldn't tell you its stats at all. Still, yeah.
I reskinned all of the zombie attacks as like DDTs and pile drivers and clothesline.
Oh yeah, that was fun, true. But the stage though, like it was kind of like was it a purple worm? Was it a giant mimic? Like what was going on there?
It was a wrestling stage that turned into a mimic. Yeah,
it was a mimic, right? So then you use mimic stuff and then add some cool things, yeah, and make it 8 times larger.
Yeah. Rad.
All right. Well, this has been a wonderful conversation so far. Now we're going to move into our bonus material, and we're going to show you a clip from the film, and then we'll get your reaction. Sound good?
We're talking about the documentary, right? That we shot at the Indian Castle. Okay, cool. All right. Yeah, I've not seen this. I'm excited.